What's happening, everybody? Justin, Bridgewater's finest on YouTube, Blockbuster_guy on Twitter, and welcome to week 9 of my weekly CFL football pick show for the 2025 CFL season and postseason. And things were looking pretty good there for a little bit last week. 2-2 straight up and 3-1 against the spread. Felt like we had a little something cooking maybe. Unfortunately, gave most of it back on the totals and wound up 6-6 for the week in week 8. Feeling like I'm the king of 500 this season. I've been right around that for the vast majority of the weeks. But what that does mean is I'm still hovering right around 500 for the season as a whole. But going 3-1 against the spread last week means that for the first time in weeks, I'm above 500 against the spread. Not at 500, above 500 against the spread. And that's meaningful. That's significant. I feel pretty good about that. It's only one game, 16-15, but we'll take over 500 versus under. In terms of CFL fantasy last week, it was what I have to call a down week. Only brought in 85.1 points in fantasy last week, means I'm at 878.3 on the season. It drops my weekly average back down below 110, down to 109.8. So again, a down week as far as this season has gone for me in fantasy. It dropped my overall ranking 54 spots, now down to 439th overall across the entirety of the game. The top 500, I'm only inside the top 500 by about 5 points. So there's not a lot of margin for error there. They're at 873.2. The top 250 has now breached 900 points total. So that's what we're continuing to aspire towards, and I got to do better than I did last week. In my 2 CFL fantasy leagues, the CFL Central Fantasy Football League, as well as Christina Costabile's league, CFL Central, I did drop 4 spots overall, down from 64 to 68th overall out of like 1,300 people in that league. I think it's still the biggest league across all of CFL fantasy. And look, I'm still inside the top 70, so the season's gone fairly well. And in Christina Costable's league, interestingly enough, I actually gained 4 spots overall, up to 32nd overall out of 365. My MVP from last week was Riders quarterback Trevor Harris, put up 271 all-purpose yards, 2 touchdowns, no picks, was only good for 18.3 points, but I did have my 2 times captain multiplier on him, which means I actually got that 2 weeks in a row, having it on the correct player. So that got me, what was that? That 18.3 would be, 36.6. So that was a pretty good portion of my overall score from last week. The rest of my roster didn't really do a ton. Hoping we don't have a repeat of that this week. Speaking of this week, here is our slate of games for week 9 in the CFL. We got the Calgary Stampeders traveling to Ottawa to take on the REDBLACKS. Toronto and Winnipeg rematch their game from last week, this time taking place in Manitoba. We got the Hamilton Ticats on the road in Edmonton taking on the Elks, and the Saskatchewan Roughriders travel to Montreal to take on the Alouettes. The BC Lions are on bye this week, and if you'll notice, every game is an interdivisional game, East versus West. So let's start with that first game in the nation's capital, the Calgary Stampeders in Ottawa taking on the REDBLACKS. The Stampeders lose Vernon Adams in the second half of their game last week, pretty well right away to start the fourth quarter. PJ Walker came in at quarterback. The offense has an absolute stutter with Vernon off the field, and Montreal comes back to win that game last week. The Alouettes scoring, I think it was 9 unanswered points in the fourth quarter on 3 field goals. On Ottawa's side, they are off their bye, losers of 4 consecutive games. Relatively competitive games. I think only one of them was by multiple possessions. So relatively competitive games, but Ottawa's been on the wrong side of all 4 of them. It just seems like the injury bug will not cease for the Calgary Stampeders. We got Vernon Adams now, and again, there's question about whether Vernon plays this week. If you would ask me to put money on it, I would believe that PJ Walker's going to be the starting quarterback this week. Stranger things have happened, but without the actual game day roster, which as of recording time, I don't believe we have, if I had to put money on it, I think Vernon probably dresses as like the emergency third quarterback, but I would assume it's going to be PJ Walker under center. You've got You've got Damian Alford, who's still not practicing, and I believe is not playing this week. Clark Barnes, I think, is still not playing. Now Jalen Philpott has been dealing with an injury and has been in and out of practice. So it's just the injury bug will not cease for the Stampeders. On Ottawa's side, the Red Blacks offensive line, their play continues to be damning as it's been all season long. They have allowed 15 quarterback sacks up to this point in the season, which is the second most allowed by any team in the league. And these two teams are also worlds apart defensively, even though Calgary does kind of subscribe to that bend but don't break, especially lately. They've been giving up their fair share of yardage, but when it comes to teams actually putting points on the board, the Stamps have been very, very good keeping points off of that scoreboard. So the discrepancy here between these two defenses is massive. This is going to be the Stampeders' fifth consecutive game without a bye week, but they are unbeaten on the road this season. They've won all three of their road games, and Ottawa, even though they're coming off their bye and they should be well rested, have not won a game in Ottawa this season. They are 3 up and 3 down in terms of losing football games on their home field. Even though Calgary, might be starting to feel a little bit of that fatigue, I think I got to go with the Stampeders here, even if it is PJ Walker under center. I think they've just got a better roster top to bottom. Looks like we're going to have Drew Brown and Braylon Addison available for Ottawa, which is an upgrade to their offense, but I think we got to go with the Stamps here. Let's take Calgary on the road to beat Ottawa. On the line, the Red Blacks are taking plus 4.5 here as a fairly strong home dog, but look, they're only 2-5 against the spread all season. Calgary is the exact opposite of that. They've covered 5 of their 7 spreads this year. I think I got to lay the minus 4.5 here on the Stampeders. I think it's the smart play. On the line, or so not on the line here, the game total is 52.5 points, not the biggest total of the week. Neither one of these teams are above 500 to the over this year, and they combine to be 6-8. I think we got to take the under here. I think I got to lean on that Stampeders defense and what we may see as a comparative struggle of the Stamps on the offensive side with PJ Walker. We're going to go with an under here, under 52.5 points in Calgary, Ottawa. Let's go Stamps 24, Red Blacks 17. So as you can see, I barely have this game getting into the 40s, but Calgary wins. Calgary covers the minus 4.5 on the road and give me an under on the 52.5 point total. Let's go next to Winnipeg in that rematch from the game last week, Argos and Blue Bombers. And the Argos put up 31 points and 470 yards of offense on the board on the Bombers last week en route to a fairly comfortable victory, despite the fact that the Argos got smoked at the line of scrimmage. Winnipeg pinned their ears back, got 5 quarterback sacks on the Argos in that game. And they eat an obviously injured Zach Collaros alive in the secondary. From the very beginning of that game, you could look at that and go, oh, he's still hurt. He throws 2 interceptions. They take him out of the game. I don't know whether he re-aggravated the injury he clearly still had or whatever, but they bring Chris Streveler in. At what point do you start saying that we have to save a player from themselves? You see an instance of that with Collaros here. Probably shouldn't have played this game, period. Davis Alexander goes into the hamstring injury. He thinks it's good. He winds up re-aggravating it. They come back to win that game, but now he's gone for 6 weeks. At what point do you say, you sit a player down and go, listen, we are benching you. We are saving you from yourself because you're not healthy. At what point do the Bombers have to do that with Collaros? Clearly, it looks like it's probably going to be this week because I imagine Streveler's getting the start. On Toronto's side, this was Nick Arbuckle's cleanest game of the season. He puts up 348 all-purpose yards, 2 touchdowns, no picks. His first game this season, not throwing an interception. Very noteworthy for Nick Arbuckle. And what is also very noteworthy, the Argos finally, in at least one game this season, generate a ground game. The combination of Deonta McMahon and Kalen LeBourne run 21 times for 84 yards. And while that isn't exactly oh my God, jumps off the page, this is their first game for the Argos where they go above 70 yards rushing as a team. Let that sink in for a second. How, ineffectual do you have to be in the run game that you don't generate 70 as a team even once prior to week 8? They go for 24 carries for $116 on the ground. Once again, their first time all season long going over 70 yards rushing. The Bombers last week continued an uncomfortable trend of inefficiency on second down. It was their second straight game where they were less than 45% offensively on second down. That is drives stalling, that's punting the ball away, that's less time with the football in your offense's hands. And again, they've officially got a quarterback dilemma here. And I think that's not reflected anywhere better than the fact that the Bombers have turned the ball over 17 times in the last 3 games, if you count turnovers on downs. 17 in 3 games. Even if you don't count turnovers on downs, if you only count interceptions thrown and fumbles lost, it's still 10 in the last 3 games. That in and of itself would be unacceptable. Then you tack on the turnovers on downs, 17 turnovers in 3 games. You can't win with that, and Winnipeg hasn't. Wouldn't you know who won the pony? They've lost 3 straight games. Not all of that is on the quarterback, but a lot of it's on the quarterback. So we'll see what we're going to run into this week. I think with this game, I'm going to do the same thing that I did with the game last week, which was I'm going to take Winnipeg to win, because it's just baffling to me that this team has lost 3 straight games. The concept of them losing 4 straight games puts them in rarefied stink air with some of the worst teams in the league, and I just can't imagine it. So the same thing I did last week, I'm going to do this week. I'm going to take the Bombers to win, but I'm hedging my bets and I'm taking the Argos against the spread. The Bombers, after that showing last week, the Bombers opened favored by 8.5 points. Who's making these lines? Right now, they're still favored by 6.5. I'm going to take the Bombers to win the game, but give me the Argos plus the 6.5 points. Last week's spread didn't make sense. This week's spread very much does not make sense to me either. Total in the game set at 51 points. I'm going to take an over here because for whatever else you can say about the Bombers, they've scored their points this year. They're 4-2 to the over, I think, in their 6 games. So I like them to win, so let's lean on that over hitting one more time. Over the 51-point total in Winnipeg, Toronto. I'm going to go 28-27. This could very well be a walk-off at the end of the game or very close to the end of the game for Winnipeg to win. So 28-27, Bombers win. Give me the Argos plus the 6.5 against the spread because they could certainly win the game again. And give me an over on the 51-point total. We travel to Edmonton now where the Elks are going to play host to the Hamilton Ticats. The Ticats are the hottest team in the CFL right now, winners of 5 consecutive games. And last week they win what I think is a legitimate game of the year candidate. Last week, Hamilton and BC, 2 touchdowns in the final 3 minutes for Hamilton to come back and win that game. Very back and forth, super competitive game with 2 of the best quarterbacks in Canadian football. So that was one of my favorite games to watch all year long. On Edmonton's side, their offensive line completely disappears. 8 quarterback sacks allowed and absolutely 0 run game. However, Cody Fajardo, the switch to Fajardo at starting quarterback over Trey Ford, he nearly wills this thing into existence with a 14-0 run in the 4th quarter. They come back and just fall a little bit short against Saskatchewan, but boy, Cody Fajardo wanted that one bad. You could tell in that 4th quarter how bad Cody wanted that game. Despite the fact that they've won 5 straight games, the Ticats do have some slop to clean up, especially coming out of their game last week. They lost the turnover battle 3-1 in that game. They took 8 penalties for 60 yards. Not damning, but just stuff that you've got to clean up, especially, when right now you're considered probably one of the powers in the East Division, which not a lot of people expected, I don't think. But you have a legitimate chance here in the East, and stuff like that against top tier teams is going to, it's going to cost you more often than not. Once again, I keep going back to the 8 quarterback sacks allowed for the Elks, and they took 133 yards on 11 penalties. What do we call that, class? Not a winnable effort. Except, because it was Cody Fajardo, it almost was. This is interestingly one of the most difficult weeks, I think, of the entire season up to this point. Other than like weeks 1 and 2, when you don't really know who teams are yet and who they're going to become for this season, this week is very difficult because even the games like this one that I think you have you got a pretty good lean right away who you think is going to win the game, there's just enough factors against those teams that it causes you to go, well, wait a second. Like, they got to overcome that and that and that and that. Like, is the upset live here? You go back to Calgary and Ottawa. That game should be a no-brainer with the way Calgary's played this season. But then you have the injury to Vernon Adams and all the injuries to the receivers, and you're like, wait a minute, is it? Same thing with this game. Hamilton, winners of 5 straight games. Very good football team on both sides of the ball so far this season. But this will be their 6th consecutive game. It's going to be their 3rd straight game on the road. So there's factors going against them. I think they missed a practice earlier this week too. So they got to get in like 2 practices and a walkthrough and then fly to Edmonton. So it's like, wait a minute. Ultimately, I'm going to lean on the fact that Hamilton has won 3 of their 4 road games this season. And look, Edmonton just overall, even though their 1 win this year was in front of their home crowd, thankfully, if any home crowd deserves to see a win, it was definitely Edmonton's home crowd. I think I got to lean on the fact that Hamilton's just objectively a better football team. And aside from some Cody Fajardo magic, I have to assume that Hamilton probably wins this thing fairly comfortably. So give me the Ticats on the road in Edmonton to beat the Elks and extend the win streak to 6 games. On the line, Edmonton's taking plus 4.5 here, as once again, like Ottawa, a fairly strong home dog. But Edmonton is only 2-4 against the spread this season. They've got their 1 win, and they've only got 1 other number that they've covered this year. So that's close enough where it's under a touchdown. I got to lay the points on the Ticats if I like them to win. So give me the minus 4.5 on Hamilton. Total in the game is the largest total of the week at 54.5 points. I think I've got to go with the over here. If you look at games dating back to last year, the last 10 games for both of these teams and the last handful of head-to-head matchups have all kind of been trending over, especially head-to-head. I think 4 of the last 5 head-to-head between these two teams have gone over the point total. Both of the teams, again, just in general are trending more so to the over. I don't think they stay under this number. So we're going to go over the 54.5 point total. I actually think this game has a pretty good chance of getting into the 60s. Give me like a 36-26, something like that. Ticats win. Ticats cover the minus 4.5 and give me an over on that 54.5 point total. And the last game we're going to look at sees the Saskatchewan Roughriders in Montreal to take on the Alouettes. Riders are now winners of 2 straight games after holding on to beat Edmonton in that aforementioned comeback, despite allowing 14 points to Cody Fajardo in the 4th quarter. The Alouettes record 3 fourth quarter field goals to upset Calgary. I think that final was 23-21 or something like that, behind, a fairly winnable effort from McLeod Bethel-Thompson, 283 all-purpose yards, threw a touchdown. He did have an interception, so I'm hesitant to call it a winnable effort, but it wasn't a losable effort. I can't call last week's game for the Riders anything but an offensive letdown. It felt like a game where the offense really should have been able to explode. They put up just 334 all-purpose yards on offense after putting up over 500 in the previous week. So that's a pretty big downturn. That may not improve all that much this week with news that Sam Emilus probably not going to be in the lineup. It did definitely feel like Montreal got away with one last week. The Vernon Adams injury, the fact that, Calgary took 121 yards in penalties in that game. So it just, again, gave Montreal opportunity after opportunity after opportunity. And the fact that Calgary only had 13 offensive plays in the fourth quarter. It was a couple of 3-and-outs and a couple of pass completions, I think it was, from PJ Walker. So the offense had nothing in the fourth quarter. So it really did feel like Montreal kind of circumstantially got away with one last week. I'm not going to take the win away from them, but it's tough to kind of pound your chest after a game like that. Genuinely, you could be forgiven if neither one of these teams inspires a ton of confidence coming into this game. The Riders are unbeaten on the road this year. They've won all 3 of their road games. They're also 5-2 against the spread to go along with their 6-1 record. But I got to tell you, I don't think there's too much that differentiates these two teams right now. Specifically right now. I don't feel like there's a whole heck of a lot between the two of them. I think there's one kind of offensive nuclear weapon in this game that's healthy, and that's AJ Ouellette, and that might be enough to tip the scales, but I think I'm going to take the upset here. I think I'm going to take the Alouettes at home to get the win over the Riders. Again, two very, very competitive teams, and if you're going to, give me the 2.5 points and give me a home dog, I think I'm probably going to have to take it in circumstances like that. So give me the Alouettes to get a marginal upset win. Like I say, they're taking plus 2.5 here at home as a marginal home dog, so give me the plus 2.5 on Montreal. Total in the game set at 49.5 points, and kind of like the previous game, these two teams, if you date back to last year, are both kind of trending towards the over, and the head-to-head matchups here as well kind of tend towards taking the over. Of note, head-to-head, the last 2 times that the Alouettes have been dogs, they've won the game outright. So that's not saying a lot. That's since like 2022. So it's only a couple of times that Montreal's been a dog. But I think they've won like 4 of the last 5 head-to-head. And 2 of those, they were an underdog coming into the game. So that's kind of stuff that's gone into my thought process for taking Montreal to win. I'm going to take a very marginal over here. I'm going to go like 27-24 in favor of the Alouettes. So give me Montreal to win, Montreal to cover the plus 2.5, and an over on the 49.5 point total. I've got my fantasy roster basically locked in for this week, but there may be one notable change, which we'll talk about. My Week 9 CFL fantasy roster is... let's try that one more time. Is right in front of your eyes right now. That wasn't much better, but we're going to go with it. So we are going to go with some Hamilton Ticats this week. Bo Levi Mitchell is going to be my starting quarterback. I'm going to stack him with both Keandre Smith, who had a massive game last week, and Kenny Lawler. I'm rolling Keandre Smith. He's only 4.4K. So that even if he only hits 7 or 8 points, he's basically given you value for his salary. So at 4.4K, I like Keandre Smith. Even if he only catches a couple of balls, should be fine. Kenny Lawler was quiet last week. I don't anticipate that 2 weeks in a row. Right now, I do have Brady Oliveira in as my RB1. That might change to Dedrick Mills. I'm really kind of flipping a coin between the two of them. Right now, I've got Sean Thomas Erlington in as my second running back. Second running back, I think I had 8.3K to spend. So right now I have Sean Thomas Erlington. That might change if I move off of Jareth Stearns. Now, Jareth Stearns, I feel like could be a cheat code this week. I've just got a feeling, especially if it's not Zach Collaros under center for Winnipeg, I feel like Jareth Stearns is going to have a massive game. Now, if I tier him down to, say, Robustelli for the Riders, I could afford Greg Bell instead of Sean Thomas Erlington. So there's going to be some thoughts that kind of go into a couple of these roster decisions. And we're going to go with the Ticats on the defensive side as well. There may be some value elsewhere. On the defensive side, like I might look at some of the lower priced options, maybe even, heaven forbid, maybe the Red Blacks, just to save some extra money. But right now, that's what the fantasy roster looks like. It may have some polishing before the week is out. There you go, folks. Those are the picks and plays for Week 9 in the CFL. We'll go over them here with you one more time. I've got the Calgary Stampeders going to Ottawa and beating the Red Blacks 24-17, laying the -4.5 on the Stamps in a game that stays under the 52.5 point total. I got the Winnipeg Blue Bombers at home beating the Toronto Argos by a single point, 28-27, taking the +6.5 on Toronto in a game that goes over the 51 point total. I got the Hamilton Ticats in Edmonton beating the Elks 36-26, laying the -4.5 on Hamilton and going over the 54.5 point total. And to end the week, I've got the Montreal Alouettes upsetting the Saskatchewan Roughriders in Montreal 27-24, taking the +2.5 on Montreal in a game that goes over the 49.5 point total. That's it for me, folks. Justin, Bridgewater's Finest on YouTube, Blockbuster_guy on Twitter. This is why we do it. It's going to be a difficult week, but this is why we do it. This is why we play the game. Ladies and gentlemen, we squabble up against these games, and we try to find some winners. I think I found some winners this week. Enjoy the games. We'll see you again for Week 10.